we're going to talk about the 6 main benefits of Wikibranding. And as he mentioned before, it's about really getting your customers involved and using their contributions. And really, if you look at this as a threat, that's the wrong way to do it. Don't look at it as people sort of infringing on your space. Look at it as a huge opportunity. So in the first one we look at is brand advocacy. So that's when you get into your word of mouth. And you're going to have people that are fans of your product going out there and really making a difference. The example we have up here, Maker's Mark, they have this wonderful ambassador program. And I checked on Facebook last night, and just on the Facebook part of it, they're up over 100,000 people. So if you get involved with it, they put a barrel that has your name on it. You can order from the barrel. You get access to promotional stuff, and your job is to be an ambassador, to go in and talk about the product. Related to that is the next one, brand perception, and that's people doing the PR for it. And a great example we have in the book is Mozilla, where fans of Mozilla look at it, not just that it's a great product, but it's also an underdog. And we have a story in there about people making a crop circle in the shape of the Mozilla logo that's 144,000 square feet. And if you have people on there that are doing your PR, it's not just that they're spreading the message, but if you run into a crisis and you need to have help from the community needs to be in place before that. But if they are, they're going to be much stauncher responders and defenders of your company than you could be. Moving into the next one, brand support. This is something I think, Sean, you would agree really surprised us. We expected the first two, but in support, that's where you have customer service actually done in by your organization, or by your fans. A lot of good examples that are up here on Twitter. One of them is 12 Force, and that is the Best Buy Twitter service, where they thought, hey, people are going to have trouble setting up consumer electronics they buy from us. Why don't we have our top people working on that via Twitter? They could just be people working in stores. What surprised them is they found out that there were people that are actually hobbyists. Now, this struck me as something that was odd. People say, I really like helping others figure out problems they're having with customer electronics. I'm going to do this. So they found that there's people helping in 12 Force that were just civilians. Serendipity, that gets into another area where you start with one purpose. And the wonderful thing about social media, also a scary thing about social media, is you can get benefits, and there'll be extra effects you didn't plan on. And this happens where you see things going viral. For example, a good example is the Dove campaign for Real Beauty. It had a wonderful message behind it. It went completely viral and ended up becoming far more than just a marketing message, but it was really a hopeful message for women. Getting into the next one is content. That is your communities actually generating content for the brand. Amazon's a good example of that, where you get into the people that are really active reviewers on Amazon. They become their own brand and become a great asset for the company in general. We talked to one guy who was rated in the top 10 Amazon reviewers, and he told us that he has a lot of fans himself, and people decide what to buy, what products to buy, just based on what he describes. And he's also very good at telling people not just, here's a great book, but here are the type of people that would really enjoy it. And it's very competitive on that of who's the top-ranked people. And he's adding not just sales to them, but also sales for authors. So he tells us he gets dozens of unsolicited books coming into him every day. Insight, that's what I was talking earlier about. This is about how you can have your research and development created by users. A good example on this is Lego Mindstorms, which is a robotics program where you have robots and there's old-school Lego pieces, and they have a very active user groups where they have wonderful people in there talking about creations they made, tools towards it, and blueprints and that sort of thing. So what Lego did is it went into the user group and invited the top users, said, hey, are you guys interested in helping us to design the next version of Lego? And they jumped right on that. So it's not just that they donated their time. They actually paid their own way to Denmark to go and develop that. So very, very cool, and they looked at it as something that was a great asset given to the company so they could donate their expertise. Now, sometimes when we talk about these things, people say, well, Lego Mindstorms is cool. My organization may not be cool, may not be as interesting. We don't buy that. If we go on into the next slide, here's some examples of companies that you may not consider to be cutting edge, but they're something that is really interesting. So we have up here, for example, Aviva. That's just an insurance company. They did a wonderful product in with their promotion with their community fund, where they put online says, how should Aviva be making its donations this year? And what the contest was set up is that users would go in and recommend something, say, wouldn't it be great if you spent it on a community park in this city? So the idea was one part. Then the second part is you had to go and get as many people as you knew to vote on it. So the creation of that was putting the ideas in and also help promoting it. Aviva was able to help a lot of communities, but also got a lot of great exposure for it. Now, I've known people for years, many, pre the internet, that were talking about WD-40 and all the various things that it can do. They have a fan club up there that right now has more than 2,000 uses of it. And if you have something they hadn't thought of, put it right up. So, Sean, do you want to go on to the next part?
Yep, although I must make two admissions. One, I am a card-carrying member of the WD-40 fan club, so magically enough, 3 or 4 new uses every week. It's an amazing, amazing thing. And I do want to make a shout-out. Jennifer had a great question on automotive. Hopefully we'll get to it at the end. And since we are tag-teaming here, I want to give a shout-out to Bill Lambert, Paige Freeborn, and Jessica Lee on Wikibrands, because they took up the offer of outreaching the Wikibrands and the Awareness Inc. hashtag. So there you go. We are of the people. So here's 10 ways that brands are getting it right. And I'd love to say this is a science. Certainly, these are some guidelines that we learned from studying the top 100 brands. But there truly is a difference between actually, being social and doing social. This is not one of those check boxes. In most companies, there's a cultural change at play that needs to happen. And sometimes it's CEO-driven. In the case of Dell, it was managed out of a crisis. In the case of something like Zappos, it's been there since the start. And in some rare occasions, it is from the bottom up. I take Lego as an example. They built kind of a culture from the inside out, and it really started at the frontline level where people go, wow, these people are spending a lot of time with this hobbyist type of thing, and then eventually convince the rest of the company. But I do think getting your CEO on board or your senior executive on board is important. So we're going to go through the 5 things in the orange box that people do to maintain a good wiki brand, and they are sequential: strategy to execution to technology, not the other way around. And then the 4 things that the best brands do in terms of maintaining this ecosystem, because, I can keep anyone happy for 4 weeks online. You could view this as a tactical thing, and you could come up with some magical results over 28 days. I think the key challenge is how do you sustain and keep some longevity in terms of what you're doing. So simply a cultural change. This is probably the one visual I'd look at saying, you want to describe Wikibrands in one visual, here you go. Mass marketing used to be, we'd throw bombs over the fence and see which one stuck with the small amount of people that paid attention and cared. Direct marketing came along 20, 25 years ago, then advanced by the web, and now I knew something about you. So at least I could tailor the message a little bit, so maybe your experience was a little bit better. But really at the end of the day, you were broadcasting to me, and I was either jumping for your incentive or not. Nowadays it's much more of, hey, how do I genuinely ask my consumers or customers to get under the fold with me, come on stage and actually collaborate, co-produce, co-innovate stuff. So like I said, there is a difference between being social, love the free hugs guy, versus the Moby Dick doing social. And this stuff tends to happen in 2 steps. And some people knew it by design. Most companies that got into this actually experimented and kind of found what the formula was along the way. And the 2 steps were, it's amazing what happens when you actually ask your customer to do something for you. Become an author, a producer, a scout, a tester, a broadcaster, a collaborator. And if they leave convinced that they had a great experience, they enjoyed it, they enjoyed your role in it, then magically enough they become ambassadors and advocates and kind of your true word-of-mouth evangelists. We did the same study that I talked about recently, and it may seem really granola-y, and for the hard-edge business person, I don't know how better to say it, but listening is probably the worst possible sin, or the lack of listening is the worst possible sin for potential Wikibranders. Those that don't listen, and there's almost a few elements. We talk about the 4 elements of listening in our book, but it's not only getting some insight from your customer, but it's also showing them that you've listened, that you're engaged, and then changing your business based on what you've heard. And we'll talk about some of the other kind of sins. We just got back some insight from some community management work that we've done. Interestingly enough, the biggest impasse for getting Wikibranding moving in your companies is not a technology thing, it's not a content thing, it's a cultural thing. The 2 things that were played back was my company culture doesn't accept it, or I have lack of executive or managerial support. So there are some tricks of the trade that we can get into, although it kind of gets in the weeds. I would say, though, try to find some type of sponsor in a senior position in your company if you're at a middle management or lower level to actually champion what you're trying to do. And really having good focus, hopefully it marries up your business objective with what your organization can credibly deliver, with what your brand, stated purpose and identity or DNA is, and probably most importantly, what do your members or customers want? And I can probably summarize 3 big axioms about focus. Put your social needs ahead of your company needs. Amazingly enough, and we all know we're in it for profit, amazingly enough, on the social web, if you do that, you come out ahead. Intuit's a great example of a company that 4 years ago was prevented from doing any of this stuff. Their legal counsel said, "Thou shalt not." And they have turned into, in my mind, the best B2B Wikibrand out there. And one of the rules they have for their company environments is we shall not sell in our community environments. And strangely enough, if you look at the payout on all of their community environments and some of the key metrics about engagement and how long they stick around and did they purchase anything and are they inclined to be happy about Intuit, they are all remarkably positive based on a no-sell type of criteria. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's about the time, elapsed time it takes for a customer in this world to understand whether or not they want to hang around in your web environment. And as much as I see great strategy sometimes and even great content, it's ruined based on a front page that doesn't look, A, simple, and B, lovely to look at. So if it can convince your mom to A, get excited, and B, repeat it, then I suggest go back to the drawing board. And the final thing, I call it SharePoint-itis, and I'm sure Sal would agree with me at the end of this presentation, as much as technology is important on this front, trying to get a good idea of what your strategic focus is based on your customer, your brand, your business organization is crucial. If you don't have a good inventory and audit on that stuff, a lot of times you can have a technology misfit with what you're trying to do. And as we've talked about in the book, there is a balance of culture, strategy, and execution.